right. Welcome, everybody. It is now 2 o'clock, and I would like to turn your attention to our interpretation team.
Thank you, and hello, everyone. I am Kai. I'm one of your interpreters today, and I'm here with my co-interpreter, Dalis. Hola a todos, yo soy Kai, soy una de las intérpretes hoy. Estoy aquí con mi co-intérprete, Dalis. We are facilitating a multilingual space. If you're not bilingual, please listen for the interpretation announcement. Estamos facilitando un espacio bilingüe. Si no son bilingües, por favor, que escuchen el anuncio de interpretación. Para acceder a la interpretación por computador, por favor, eligen el icono globo y después eligen su idioma, inglés o español. Para acceder a la interpretación por teléfono inteligente, por favor, seleccionen los 3 puntitos, después interpretación de idiomas y después el español o inglés. Next slide, please. Hi, everyone. To access interpretation via computer today, please select the globe icon and then your language channel, either English or Spanish. To access interpretation via smartphone, please select the 3 dots on your screen, then language interpretation, then your language channel, either English or Spanish. Please remember to speak at a moderate pace for the interpreters and to speak 1 person at a time. Por favor, se recuerden de hablar despacio para los intérpretes y también de hablar una persona a la vez. Gracias. Thank you.
Great, thank you. My name is Marlena Moore. I use they, them pronouns. I am a Black person. I am the senior program specialist here at NRCDV. I am a Black person. I have relatively long curly hair. I have glasses on. I also have a cardigan on too. And I'd like to share some brief housekeeping notes with you. We are committed to making this an equitable space in which people of all abilities can participate fully and in their preferred language. This takes everyone's commitment and effort to make a reality. For example, we have limited the use of the chat function. It's difficult to translate the chat in real time and can be inaccessible to assistive devices. Please send questions, comments, or resources directly to the event host and co-host. We'll read the questions or comments aloud so they can be interpreted, or please use the Q&A function that's at the bottom of the screen. While we aim to make this a mixed ability and multilingual space, we also know we're still learning how to do this well. Please reach out to event staff during the webinar if you are experiencing any accessibility issues. We'll also ask about accessibility in our post-webinar evaluation. Please let us know your experience and ways we can improve. We know we have much to learn and we want to improve our practice. This event features live captioning. You can access this feature by clicking caption at the bottom of your screen. We are recording the event and we'll share it through our website and YouTube channel. The Q&A feature provides an opportunity for attendees to enter questions for the presenters to respond to. We may not get to all of them depending on how many questions are provided or given during this time. We may try to find a way to give out or to answer the questions at a later time if we can. Please reach out to our staff if you are experiencing ongoing technical issues, but please note we may have limited capacity to resolve issues while the webinar is running. And at this time, I will pass it over to Funmi to start the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Marlena. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, depending on where you are. Thank you for being here with us today. My name is Funmi Ayeni, and I use she, her pronouns. I am a Nigerian-American woman with shoulder-length Black hair, and I am wearing a Black button-down shirt with a red floral design. I am the Director of Research and Evaluation at the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence, and I will facilitate and moderate this panel today. I will start off by giving you an overview of the webinar and considering what the overrepresentation of LGBTQ plus young adults are in the United States. It's really important that we are examining the innovative approaches that can adequately respond to experiences of homelessness and housing instability among this population. And so across the nation, we have identified rapid rehousing as a very innovative solution to homelessness that continues to grow in popularity for diverse populations. So for LGBTQ plus young adults, it is important to explore how rapid rehousing, this innovative solution to homelessness, can be implemented for this population. Which brings us to the purpose of our webinar today. Our focus is to learn about the core components of the Rapid Rehousing program that is currently being implemented by the LGBT Center of Central Pennsylvania for LGBTQ plus young adults. As part of our conversation today, we will discuss the challenges and the successes that they have encountered in their process, as well as the perceived impact of this program for young adults. The LGBT Center will share their path to implementation. We will talk about some of the nuts and bolts of how their program is implemented, and then we will respond to any questions from participants. Next slide, please. And so this particular innovation that we're discussing today was identified through a needs assessment project that was completed by the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence in 2022. And specifically, NRCDV conducted a needs assessment project where we were looking to document what the current and emerging barriers to safe, stable, and accessible housing was for Black, Brown, Indigenous, people of color survivors, and also document any innovative practices that were being implemented by grassroots organizations and community-based agencies to address survivors' housing needs. So we conducted a desk review. We held several listening sessions with service providers as well as survivor advocates. And we also conducted some interviews with researchers. And Rapid Rehousing program was identified as one of the innovative practices being implemented by a community-based agency partner of ours, which is the LGBT Center of Central Pennsylvania, to address the needs of LGBTQ plus young adults. And the report and the infographics that discuss the findings from that needs assessment are available on NRCDV Safe Housing Partnerships websites, and you all are welcome to review those. Next slide, please. And so to kick off our conversation today, I will pass it over to our panelists from the LGBT Center of Central Pennsylvania to briefly introduce themselves and the center. And we will get started with Amanda.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amanda Arbor. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the executive director of the LGBT Center of Central PA. We're located in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and serve a 4-county region here in Central Pennsylvania. And our mission is to foster inclusive communities, holistic well-being for LGBTQ plus people through social, educational, and cultural engagement. I will pass it over to Carter.
Before you continue, can you all speak up a little bit? Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Carter. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a dark-skinned Black American woman with short hair, a black t-shirt, and an oversized knit cardigan on top of the t-shirt. I'm the site director for Glow Harrisburg. I work for the LGBT Center of Central PA. We're a community resource center for LGBTQ plus youth and young adults of color, ages 14 to 34, although most of our participants are in their 20s and early 30s. I will toss it to TL.
Hi, I'm TL Wade, pronouns she, her, and I'm the housing case manager for GLOW. I'm just going to leave it at that because I think Amanda covered most of the information on what we do.
Thank you all for those introductions. And so we have prepared some questions for our panelists, which will guide our discussion today. And if you all have any questions as audience members, please include those in the Q&A chat box. After our initial discussion, we will then have a Q&A session where panelists will be able to respond to any questions from the audience. So to get us started, our first question for the panel is, what is the role of rapid rehousing as a strategy to address homelessness, particularly among LGBTQ plus young adults?
Yes, so rapid rehousing is a really effective strategy that we've found in working with LGBTQ young adults who are unhoused or are unstably or unsafely housed. So we use this model whenever possible to help get participants out of unsafe situations. That could be living on the street and being vulnerable to violence or victimization. It could be living with an abusive partner or family member, or in other unstable situations, such as living in an apartment that is not fit to be lived in by humans. So we found that, getting people out of those situations as quickly as possible through the rapid rehousing approach is really effective because once they're in a stable housing situation, they have a safe and stable place to live, then they can focus on improving other areas of their lives, whether it be finding a job, addressing mental health or substance misuse issues, physical health, and pursuing educational opportunities. Those things are much more possible once people have a stable place to live. And so this is in keeping with the housing first model, which really just means that we house people first without a bunch of prerequisites or hoops for them to jump through before accessing housing.
Thank you very much, Amanda. I will pause to see if Carter and TL have any additional thoughts to add before we move to the next question. Okay.
Nothing from me.
Thank you both.
We're good.
And so the next question is, can you share more about the Rapid Rehousing program that is currently being administered by the LGBT Center of Central PA? I'm specifically touching on what the funding source for this program is.
Absolutely. So the at-home program is funded by a grant from the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, PHFA, through their Pennsylvania Housing Affordability and Rehabilitation Enhancement Fund, or FARE for short, which was established by Act 105 of 2010 in Pennsylvania. So we are really grateful for this grant from PHFA, which has made the at-home program possible.
Thank you. And who does this program support in terms of the target population in the audience?
So the at-home program specifically supports LGBTQ plus young adults of color, ages 18 to 34. There's sort of a method as to why that is. So first, as an LGBTQ plus organization, we always center LGBTQ plus communities and their needs. And we also apply an intersectional lens to everything that we do. And so LGBTQ young adults of color, live at those intersections and experience greater disparities in housing and access to housing, and are often marginalized, not welcomed, or treated poorly when in mainstream housing programs. So we have a really unique role to serve in providing housing for our communities. And we specifically decided to focus on the young adult age range because there are actually more resources available for minors who are unhoused, so folks under 18 in our area. But there's a gap with folks who are in their 20s and 30s where there are really very few housing programs available to them. And so often within this age range, we see these are folks who may not have had family or other kinds of support growing up. And so are on their own, but in survival mode. And if any one thing goes wrong, if they lose a job or break up with a partner who that they're living with, then they're without a safety net and without housing. And so that's really the gap that we were seeking to fill with this program.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive response. I particularly appreciate you highlighting the intersectional lens that you will apply to your work and the specific focus on the experiences of young adults of color, as well as naming the program funding source, as we recognize that identifying funds to support programs is one of the top issues that service providers and community organizations are typically facing. So thank you. And so as part of understanding more about this Rapid Rehousing program, can you tell us more about your screening and selection process? How exactly do people get into the program?
A lot of our funding comes through our HIV testing on-site and off-site, and a lot of times that's the first contact with participants. The screening questions do include information regarding housing and safety issues, so we catch a lot of people that way. Also, all of our new participants that come in fill out a needs assessment form, and that just kind of lets us know what kind of housing situation they're in, what they might require, additional needs such as educational assistance or help with job placement. And from there, we're able to determine whether or not they are a good fit for the housing program and which program they would fall under. Once we make that determination, we generally fill out an intake form for the housing program. And that just includes a list of responsibilities for the participants, how the program works for them. Also, it includes a list of responsibilities that GLOW falls under, so they know what to expect from us. Once we have that in place, we generally work on a support plan for the participant. And what that encompasses is working with the participant to set up goals for themselves, what they would like to achieve throughout the program. And we break that up into sections. Each section is handled by a different staff member. One member might work on educational issues, one might work on setting up doctor's appointments. And all of this is going on in the background while we're searching for housing for the participant. We work with the participant to find the housing generally. We'll have them search things, and we'll also be looking at things and communicating with landlords that we've partnered with. And once we do that, we also we work with a lot of participants who have been victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, or just in general feel unsafe on their own. So we help develop a safety plan that works for them, that's going to make them feel more comfortable in their new living environment. And from there, I mean, we try to focus on rapid rehousing. A lot of different agencies in the area, it can take years to find housing for people. What we try to do is if we encounter somebody that's been on the streets, we try to set them up for a hotel stay for a while we're looking for additional housing. And then we work with our community partners and landlords that we built opportunities with to go ahead and get them housed as quickly as possible.
Thank you so much for sharing that, TL. And so from what you've said, the process of screening and selecting, as well as the types of services and supports that clients receive in the program is very extensive. Can you share more about how long people are staying in the program?
The program is set up for a 12-month session. We have a lot of people who don't need the 12 months. Once we give them some help for the first couple of months, they're fine on their own, but throughout the year, they can come back to us if they do need additional support. So it's a 12-month program, and it's kind of a tiered program. We will help with move-in costs, security deposits. During the first 3 months, we cover 100% of the rent. In month 4 and 5, we cover 75%. 7 and 9 month out, it's 50%. And then for month 10 and through 12, it's 25% of the rent we cover. The hope is to, once they've hit that 12-month point, that they feel okay on their own and they're able to handle rent on their own and feel more comfortable in their living space. And in addition to that, they're always welcome to come back to us for any other needs that they might have during that time.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And so staying on how really extensive this program is from the point of entry into receiving services up until hopefully they are then able to sustain themselves after the 12-month mark. Can you all speak more to the organizational operations, infrastructure, or supports that are in place to ensure that this program can be successful?
I'm happy to touch on that. Excuse me. TL mentioned support plans, which is a huge piece of infrastructure in our programs. So the support plans are outlining what someone's goal is in any particular area: education, employment, health, obviously housing. And that's been a great tool that's been helping us and participants a lot. It's also been something that's helped us when one staff person is out. For instance, if our housing case manager is out, anybody on staff can pull a participant's support plan and see what we're actually supposed to be focusing on. That's been a big help. Another thing is ongoing education. Sometimes we have to remind ourselves and have talks with the team about why the work that we're doing is so important and why we're doing it the way that we are doing it matters. And I always try to remind the team that we are a revolutionary space. Sometimes we get caught up in the way that we've seen things like this done in other areas, in other cities, and other experiences, and that does not matter. We're not doing things the way that other agencies do them. What else? I think our intake process, you kind of touched on this already, TL, but our intake process is a structural support that's been really helpful. And then I guess lastly, our open door policy. So participants have expressed opportunities or expressed interest in wanting to take on leadership roles, to have a bit more responsibility. And that helps our programs because there's real buy-in. They step up, they become a bit more responsible, they become a bit more assertive. They carry themselves a bit differently in front of the other participants because they're trying to show like, hey, I want to do this work too. So just having that buy-in has helped us a lot as well.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Carter. And one of the things I heard you mention, specifically the ways in which your approach to this program differs from some other mainstream approaches. Can you speak more to these intentional decisions that you all have made at the LGBT Center to tailor your program specifically to your audience?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest things is having a youth advisory board. So we have a group of young people that actually come from the populations that we are prioritizing and serving. And they meet monthly to pretty much tell us what types of programming makes the most sense for them and what is not necessarily helpful or even of interest. So that's the biggest thing. I think another thing is just doing our best to maintain an environment where our participants know that they are not only safe, but also prioritized. So I'll make the comparison of our center versus a doctor's office. Someone might come into the doctor's office and sit down. It's a very formal process. They're waiting in the lobby to be called on. They walk back in the hallway and they have a few minutes with a doctor. They get sent on their way. This is very different. People walking here, they're dapping us up, they're giving us hugs. They want to tell us about what just happened last night or what they're looking forward to tomorrow or the job that they just got. And they know that we're listening and we're supportive. We care about the whole individual, and that it resonates with them.
I think that a big part of our success with this comes from the ongoing communication that we keep with our participants. I mean, we see most of them weekly. If we don't see them, we're calling and checking on them, emailing them, throughout the week, just to say, hey, how are things going? We try to make a point over holidays to contact people because that's a low time for a lot of people. And it's just important. We try to make it feel like a family community at the center.
And I would just add too, I think as we've developed housing programs over the last couple of years, it's really been in response to like the needs and the lived experiences of our participants. A few years ago, when we didn't offer any housing services, we would send people to this agency or this agency or this agency, and either their needs wouldn't get met, or they would be treated really poorly, or it would just take forever, and they would be stuck in whatever situation they were in. So it really came out of a necessity of what we saw, where needs were not getting met, and we knew that we needed to do something different and we could do it differently. And that's really how this has evolved for us.
Thank you all for those responses. I particularly appreciate the emphasis on that whole person approach and really focusing on communicating regularly with clients, as well as building meaningful relationships that move beyond very transactional way of providing services and focuses more on a relational approach. So thank you all so much for sharing those. With a program of this nature, I would imagine that you all have in fact encountered some challenges in the process. So can you speak more to any anticipated or unanticipated challenges that you have encountered in managing the program and how you were able to successfully mitigate those challenges?
We have several challenges. I'll start with sometimes having to fight to get the resources that we need from other agencies that purport to provide resources. So just today, I had someone tell me that they could not help my participant because my participant, who is currently experiencing homelessness, needs to prove that they have residency in this county. So things like that can be very frustrating. I mean, part of what we do, GLOW, as a program of the LGBT Center, is HIV prevention and education work. And we know that a lot of our trans women and gay men that we're serving are engaged in sex work at higher rates than people that don't identify like that. It's hard to stop them from engaging in sex work because we can't guarantee that they'll get jobs. We have people that are super committed and going out sharing their resumes and talking to people, and they're getting looked over for positions that they obviously qualify for. That's a huge challenge. We also have to take into consideration that a lot of our participants are living in abject poverty. So there's so many things that we take for granted, like having a cell phone and being able to keep it on, so that recruiters and potential employers can contact you. Landlords can reach out and say, hey, you have the apartment. Like, that's a big challenge. People miss important appointments because they don't have the money to keep their phones on. And if they aren't doing the best with communication, then they're not letting us know, hey, can you pay my phone bill? That's not an issue for us. We take care of that when a participant needs it. Food insecurity is a big thing. Transportation is a big thing. In our city, in Harrisburg, we have a terrible public transportation system. So it's not safe for some of our participants to navigate the city on foot, which kind of precludes them from going after certain opportunities that they would otherwise. where I could go on forever. We didn't realize it would be this difficult for landlords, or difficult for us to find landlords that would be willing to work with us. TL has done an excellent job of building rapport with different landlords. So we do have this list of folks we know we can house people with you all. But there's all of these other landlords that are just not rocking with us at all, and we don't understand. TL's like, we can pretty much guarantee you will have rent paid for 1 year. What are you saying? I guess the last thing I'll leave you all with is capacity. Just as a staff, I mean, as you can see, our entire staff isn't here, but we're a small team. And we don't have enough staff to do things exactly the way we want, and to serve our participants the way I think we imagine they should be served. So yeah, plenty of challenges, also plenty of successes, but those challenges are definitely important to highlight.
I just want to say, along the lines of the challenges that Carter mentioned, it is hard finding housing for our community, just because of, racism, homophobia. But I mean, we have the hardest time, I think, with our trans participants, because they go through so much. With employment, it's difficult. With the housing, it's difficult. So we're really always trying to work hard to help them as much as we can.
One more thing I meant to add: undiagnosed or untreated mental illnesses are something that we see a lot, that makes everything obviously more difficult than it would be otherwise. So we're kind of like a catch-all agency where people may have been navigating life and getting by in a certain way, but they spend so much time at GLOW, and they're a lot of times in communication with staff. We're catching things that people might have missed that worked with them for a year. You know what I mean? But there were case managers that checked in once a month for 30 minutes. So that's a challenge, but also a blessing, because we're able to connect people to the appropriate resources when we do find that.
Thank you both for sharing, Cara and Tail. And I heard you both mention very salient challenges that you have encountered in your process, ranging from food insecurity to lack of employment, to transportation issues, to mental health problems, as well as even issues related to the lack of capacity within the organization. And still, you all have been able to record successes in your work, which is really, really impressive and exciting. Can you both tell me a bit more about the ways in which you've been able to mitigate some of these challenges when you've encountered them, whether that's in relation to working with landlords? I know, Carter, you started talking about a situation, or related to working with clients and participants who are having difficulties accessing employment options, transportation, keeping cell phones on, all of these challenges. What are some of the strategies that you've applied to address those?
I'm just constantly talking to landlords about the situation and about the need in the community for the housing. A lot of people are unaware how hard it is for the LGBT community to navigate sometimes throughout different situations that we all take for granted. And a lot of times they're on board once you take the time to talk to them, build a relationship, and always that guarantee that they're going to get their rent for at least a year. And Carter does a lot of legwork. Carter, as far as employment, will take people to job fairs. She just did 2 job fairs, I believe, last week. We take people to their appointments. We'll take them to do a walkthrough of a new apartment that they want to look at. It's just a matter of just being there for them and really trying to meet them where they're at.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And so I want us to talk about the successes because you all have definitely recorded successes in your work. So can you tell me what successes you've encountered in managing the program and some of those emergent positive outcomes that you are starting to note among participants?
Sure. I'm going to shout out TL again because she's the reason that so many of our participants have recently been housed. That's the goal for most of our participants, and we can say that we have housed quite a number of participants in this year alone. Sometimes that's short-term housing, sometimes long-term, but I mean, that's a huge success that we can never overlook. Obviously, the relationships that we've built with different community stakeholders, landlords, even people that help us go on apartment hunts, people that don't even come to Glow, that will email us or text us and say, hey, so-and-so is renting out an apartment, you should check it out. All of those things are great successes, just to see how engaged and involved the community can be. We also see better mental health outcomes. We see more participants taking advantage of substance use disorder programs. We see more people getting employed, staying employed. And I want to attribute that to people who once may have thought they were out here navigating the world on their own. Now there's some accountability there because there's a support system. Like, you're going to have to come back in here one day and see us, and we're going to ask you, did you go to that interview? Did you submit that paperwork? How was your first week of work? Like, you know that there are people, excuse me, that care and are invested and are going to want to know that you are working towards your goal, because you're not in it alone anymore. You know what I mean? Now, me, Antiel, and Tony, and Amanda, like, they're going to follow up. So definitely a success just to see goals that weren't being met before now being met because people have the proper supports. Yeah.
I think in just the overall confidence that you see in participants over time is really great. Like, a lot of people will come in for the first time, they're kind of shy, they kind of keep to themselves. But as time goes on, you really see them start to blossom. They're engaged, they want to volunteer, they want to look at colleges or just different classes and things that they can do.
Yeah, thank you both for sharing that. So it really sounds like the benefits of this program for participant extends beyond just that immediate access to housing, where you all are noting that not only are participants being able to maintain housing, but they're also able to address some of the other co-occurring issues that we know are commonly happening with individuals who are experiencing housing instability or homelessness, and noting some of these mental health impacts, social impacts, economic impacts. So it really does sound like the whole person approach that you all are taking to the work is eventually resulting in whole person processes and outcomes for you all. So thank you so much for sharing about some of the successes that you've encountered in the program. And so when we take into account some of the structures that you all have in place, right, and put that side by side, the challenges and successes that you've encountered, both anticipated challenges and unanticipated challenges, what are some of the recommendations and guidance that you have for advocates, for service providers, for agencies that are interested in securing funding and starting to implement their own rapid rehousing programs?
I'm sure we all have something to contribute to this, but I'll start by saying I think it's important that a service provider take the time to get to know the person in front of them and don't put that person in a category, in a group, in a box. Just because someone presents as well-spoken and pretty shoes, nice makeup, doesn't mean that this person can read. It just because someone looks super rough does not mean that they're not super bright and on point and motivated. So it's super important to take the time to talk to the participant, see exactly what they're dealing with and how we can support them instead of just putting our assumptions on them. Like, you probably need this, this, and that. And that's what we'll work on. TL, what you got?
Yeah, just communication is so key with participants. I mean, we all know what our participants need in our own head, but it's very important to ask them what they need in addition, and then try and fill in some of the gaps or help them recognize where they have gaps, rather than just saying, hey, you need this, you need to go here. What is it you'd like to do with your life? Where would you like to see yourself? I think that's just very important, and it makes them open up a little bit more to you.
And I think, I know I said this before, but I want to reiterate it. I think it's that important to follow through. We all know agencies that say they offer case management and they're going to follow up, but their follow-up and case management looks different than it does on our side. Like, we really are maybe blowing up your phone or meeting you every time you walk into Glow at the door to say, come into the office and tell me what's going on. But as much as that might annoy a participant, we see over time they appreciate it and they look forward to it, and it leads to results that are positive.
Yeah, and I would add, in terms of agencies seeking to access funding around this, I mean, there is a lot of different, funding opportunities out there for housing. And we have a number of different funding streams that support housing in different ways at Glow. For anyone who's in Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency grant is a really great one to apply for. Some of our other funding streams are very, very restrictive and kind of don't have this whole person approach of, like, if someone needs housing, they might also need food and might also need bus tickets and like all of these other kind of things. And so PHFA does take that into account. And so we're able to use funding to support those other things along with rent to kind of support that whole person. So I would definitely recommend that. Or if you're in other states, maybe there's an equivalent funding stream at your state level as well. And in terms of kind of building the culture of the program, like Carter was talking about earlier, like really being committed to doing it differently from a lot of mainstream agencies, where it's more transactional. You have all of these hoops to jump through, and caseworkers are not really treating people as real people. So I think really being committed to having an approach that like treats people with care and centers their needs and approaches it in a collaborative process, and really uses this housing first model, I think is really important. And doing that ongoing education, again, like Carter was talking about earlier, making sure the team is really on board with, people shouldn't have to like prove that they need things or jump through all of these hoops. We can give people what they need with dignity, in collaboration with them. And so making sure, folks kind of break down some of the harmful things that we often encounter in nonprofits or social service providers in terms of that mindset, and kind of transforming that into something different.
Very good points, Amanda. I just wanted to add one more thing. I want to encourage everyone venturing out into this work or that's already doing this work to remember the little things. Sometimes we can get really focused on the big things and forget the little things, which are super important. For example, this person is experiencing homelessness right now and needs to be in a hotel. We put them in a hotel, pat ourselves on the back. We did it. But that person is at the hotel and they do not have transportation to get to the job interview, and they do not have money to eat while they're at the hotel, and they do not have a cell phone that is turned on. So those things can't go overlooked if you're committed to doing the work in a way that actually respects that participant as a whole person. And some people aren't going to offer oh, I need this, can y'all help with this? Because we've provided this one big thing. But it's on us to say, do you have this? Will you need that? Can we support with this? So that they can give us a yes or no answer. We kind of learned that the hard way. We would put someone in their own apartment and be like, yes, we did it. We forgot that this person does not have a bed. There's no furniture in the apartment. So we have to figure out a way to get that done. And we did, because TL is amazing, but it's important to remember the little things.
Thank you all for sharing that. And so just taking from what you all have said, it's really not just about, getting people housed quickly. That's the starting point. But in order to support people to be able to maintain housing afterwards, there's a lot of intentional support that needs to go into making sure that they have access to all of what they need. And it shouldn't really be waiting for people to voice a need, but consistently checking in with them to ensure that they are aware of all the services and options that are available to them. And if they do have a need, there is that open door policy that you all have also mentioned, that they can come and share those needs with you. I appreciate you, Amanda, really highlighting the funding streams and naming that it is true that some funding sources are very restrictive. This is also something that we've learned in our work with you all under the Flex Funding Project work, and really it emphasizes the importance of braiding funding streams, being able to identify multiple sources of funding. So if you identify one source of funding that will specifically cover rent for folks, then it would be helpful to identify other pots of monies that may be able to cover some of these other needs that we've discussed today around transportation or mental health support, or just even helping people keep their cell phones turned on. So thank you all so much for sharing. Before we move into opening it up to receive any questions from the audience, are there any final thoughts that you all would like to share about any of the questions that we've discussed so far?
One thing I'll just add is that, for folks who are maybe contemplating starting a program like this, it might feel like overwhelming and like, oh my goodness, how are we going to get the funding and staff and everything to do all of this? Like for us, it started really small, like what, 3.5 years ago, a staff member, brought up housing as a need that was emerging from participants, and we decided to start a GLOW emergency housing fund. And it was literally like a Facebook fundraiser was our very first funding to support housing at GLOW. I think we raised like maybe $2,000, and that was like our seed money. And it was able to fund maybe a month of back rent here, or a gift card for food here, or some bus tickets there. Like it wasn't a lot, but it was a starting point. And that's something that, in addition to grant funding, tapping into community resources and people who are willing to give even a small amount can have an impact and can kind of start something that you're able to grow from there. Because once we had established that emergency housing fund, then we were able to share more about, these are the needs we see emerging. These are the needs we've been able to meet. These are the needs we're not able to meet. And that I think really helped us to be able to be positioned well to apply for some of these bigger grants, since we had some of that data and kind of the start of an established track record in addressing housing needs with our communities.
Thanks a lot for sharing that, Amanda. Okay, so we are going to segue into going over any questions that have come in from members of the audience. And if you haven't already shared a question in the Q&A chat box, I encourage you to do so, so that our panelists are able to answer those questions for you all today. And so the first question that we received is, how do you engage landlords in working with the youth who do not have rental history, poor or no credit, and for those that do not have 3 times the rent?
It is definitely not easy. Apartment complexes are usually out of the question, but you usually have much better luck with private landlords. Just explaining to them what the program is and who it is focused on. And then we let them know that we are always there as support, not only for the participant, but for them if they have any issues, such as maybe this person's never lived on their own before and they're not used to like quiet hours or something like that. We'll address it with the participant for them. We also, like I said before, we mentioned to them that we're going to make sure that they get their rent so long as the participant is living there for that first year. If the participant cannot keep up with their percent of the rent for a month, we'll help them with that. So, I mean, really, there's no reason for a landlord to say no once you start talking to them and just letting them know that things are going to be okay. We also do check-ins with our participants, some of the younger ones. We'll go meet them at the apartment. While we're there, we'll look around, we'll talk to them, ask them if they have any maintenance issues or if anything unsafe is happening in the building. And if it is, we'll address it with the landlord for them. And the landlords generally appreciate that sort of thing too, because they want to make sure that their property is well taken care of.
Thank you. And then the second question that came through is, my community once had a rapid rehousing program for people with mental health diagnosis. And from what I remember, there were issues with landlords not wanting to work with the program because there were issues with program participants damaging the rental units. I would be very interested in learning more about how you were able to build relationships with landlords.
From my end, it's we go to landlord events. There's different ones throughout the community throughout the year and get an opportunity to meet with some of them face to face, making phone calls to local landlords and leasing agents.
Yeah. I want to add to that person's question. We have had our share of people destroying property. Okay. It definitely happens, but we try our best to prepare the participant before they go into a hotel or an apartment, especially when they fall under the criteria that person had mentioned. You don't have 3 months of rent, you don't have rental history, you may even be unemployed or currently, in the process of starting your job. Please act like you have some sense. Please respect this person's property. Please respect the relationship that we've struggled to build with the landlord. Please understand that everything you do has a consequence, and you want to be able to have your own apartment in the future that you're taking care of. And when people check rental history, or I don't know what they call that when it's not rental, but just like the relationships that you've had in the past, we want to be able to say good things. And we've had to be tougher and tougher on that, but we do see things improving.
Thank you for naming that and specifically referencing how this is not an issue that you all have not encountered. In fact, it's something that you all have had to also deal with in your process of administering this particular program. So the next question that came through is, for the challenges discussed with other providers, what efforts have been developed to minimize that barrier, if any? And you discussed landlord engagement, but what does community outreach look like?
Community outreach takes many forms, tabling events, just showing up with a table and brochures and flyers and talking to people that walk by so that we can spread the word about the services we provide and the environment that we've created. It also is cold calling different agencies and organizations and asking if we can come by or hop on a Zoom with their staff and talk a bit about the work that we're doing. Every month, we send out a calendar to anyone that's ever expressed interest in what we have going on so that they can be in the know and spread the word amongst their individual networks. So community engagement takes a lot of different forms in the work that we're doing. I mean, our biggest means of engagement is word of mouth. Our biggest means of promotion and marketing is word of mouth. People come here, thankfully, and receive great services, but above that, they're treated very well. And so that reputation precedes us. I hope it always stays that way. But I would say that that's our number one.
And I'll just add in terms of how we navigate some of those relationships with other agencies that maybe aren't providing as good services. I mean, it depends on the situation. Sometimes like our staff are there advocating with our participants, you know, either at the appointment with them or following up with the case manager at the other agency or taking it to the person above them if they're being really shitty to our participant. So our staff definitely kind of does that kind of advocacy with other agencies on behalf of our participants. And then sometimes, you know, if we have a relationship with that agency, it's sitting down and having a really honest conversation with them to give them feedback about this is what our participants have experienced with your staff, and this isn't okay, and how can we work together so that this doesn't happen again. And, you know, it depends on the agency, depends on, you know, how they react to that, but we find ourselves in that kind of role as well. And then sometimes, you know, there are some agencies where there are enough consistent poor experiences where we just make an internal decision that we're not going to refer to them ever. You know, we hate for it to get to that point, but some folks aren't open to hearing feedback or making changes in how they do their work. And so we have to protect our folks and make sure that, you know, where we're sending them is not going to actively harm them. And I will say, like, all of the other agencies aren't terrible. You know, there are some really good agencies that we work with as well, that we know when we refer that they're actually going to treat our folks well and then help them access services. So we're really grateful for the partners we have like that, and really happy that we're able to refer folks there as well.
Thank you, Amanda and Carter, for your responses to that question. So I'm also noticing that we have some questions in the webinar chat. So I'm going to read those as well as we move through the conversation. And so there's a question that came in directly for TL, and the question is, what if they aren't employed and cannot cover 75%, 50%, or 25%? And I believe this is in reference to your earlier comments about that tiered approach to providing support.
Part of our intake list of responsibilities is that they will do their best to achieve employment within the first 3 months being in the program, because we certainly don't expect people who are in need of housing and have been living in a tent somewhere to come in our door and already have a job. So, I mean, Carter handles a lot of the job training issues. We try to connect them with places like CareerLink that has paid apprenticeships, and just the different employment agencies, things like that. Generally, everybody does have employment by the 3rd month. Of course, they don't all manage to hold on to it the whole time, but if something happens, we just start that process over again, looking for another job. And in the meantime, if they can't cover that 75% that month, we pick up what's owed, as I said, to guarantee that the landlord's getting their money for the, excuse me, for the full 12 months, and that person continues to have a place to live.
Thank you so much for responding to that, TL. So the next question that came in is, how do you manage to be helpful and empowering without enabling the participants?
That is a tough line. I'm not even sure that I know the answer. I personally try my best to let the participant know that I am proud of them every time I see them make a stride towards their goal and their support plan, whether it's small or large. So positive reinforcement when we see them making a move, but also trying to let them know that they don't need to panic, stress out, do anything drastic when things don't go as planned, because we are still here. Your support system still exists. A lot of times we're dealing with people that have been so self-sufficient, whether or not they're thriving, they've been surviving on their own. And it takes a lot for them to come into the office and close the door and sit down and tell us that they actually need help. Yeah, it's a tough line to toe, but I think that's how I've been navigating it, trying to strike that balance between positive reinforcement but then also not allowing them to beat themselves up when something goes wrong.
I think it's really difficult, and I know I struggle with it sometimes, but I try to let people know, because you'll always see people that come in and everything is a need, everything is a want. And I try to let them know, hey, we're here to help you with whatever you need, but you also have to do some of the work too. I think that's an important part of what we do, is trying to get them to work on things on their own, create their own goals, and then helping them to achieve their goals. And like Carter said, we always let them know how proud we are of even the smallest thing that they do, and just try to keep encouraging them.
I think it's important to add that a lot of the programs that we offer are incentivized, and incentives increase as we see someone doing really incredible things. So we have participants, for instance, some of our participants that are Spanish speakers, one of them in particular just enrolled in school, like in an ESL class, so they could improve their English, and then requested a laptop. Granted, the laptop was only $200 or something, and we had that available in one of our funding sources. But that's so easy to accommodate when we see this person making moves on their own. Like, yeah, we're going to meet you right here and support you with that laptop. And I think word gets around, obviously word gets around, like Glow just provided me a laptop, but not because it's a Thursday, because you did the legwork to enroll in this class that's going to improve your job opportunities.
I appreciate that insight right around the distinction between supporting them, their goals, but they have to do the work, right, to create those goals and take action to make things happen. So thank you both for responding to that. The next question we got was, do you all currently have a landlord mitigation fund to support if a property is damaged?
That is not something that we have, but that's definitely a great idea. And if anyone has resources about that, feel free to drop it in the chat.
Yes, and I will also highlight that Brittany put in the chat some resources on landlord risk mitigation funds. So I encourage folks to check those out. And then the next question that we received is a comment and a question. So it goes, you all have done a great job at displaying the success and challenges the program participants face while in your program. Can you expand on what are some of the challenges you have seen with the program's design? So rapid rehousing for LGBTQ plus young adults.
I don't know if I can specifically address anything, because it's constantly changing for us. We're constantly looking at it. If something's not going well or it's just not working for a participant, we go back and we rewrite it. So, I mean, we're constantly rewriting how we do things, constantly changing how we do things. But in this, at the same time, keeping in mind that like our support plans are not a blanket thing. Everything is tailored specifically to that specific participant.
Thank you, Teal. And the next question is, how do you navigate a lack of affordable housing opportunities in the community? In my community, affordable housing is few and far between, and the existing affordable housing is often in poor condition. Does your organization do any work with local government or order organizations to encourage development of affordable housing opportunities?
So at this time, our organization does not, that I know of, because Amanda might know some things that I'm unaware of. We are so focused on just getting people housed. But my hope is that as the housing program expands and develops, that we can play more of an advocate role and be in the ears of government to improve the situation. Because there's we have the same issues that particular person presented.
Yeah, and I'll add that I think earlier this year or last year, GLOW had like a housing forum that was under one of our other grants, and like a really great conversation with a number of different community leaders doing different types of housing work in our community. And so I think that was a great way for, you know, community members and participants and staff to have kind of a higher level conversation around that. Because like Carter said, you know, we're in the day-to-day of like, we got to get this person off the street or out of their situation and into some place that's safe. But there are these like bigger picture things going on too. So I think that was a great opportunity. And one of the people who was there was a developer. And, you know, we had, well, I guess Carter, you could talk about that. You had more of a conversation with him.
Yeah, the developer was awesome. He was fully aware of the issues that we have in Harrisburg as far as it pertains to housing. And I know he's working on a couple of small projects that might be able to benefit us immediately, but obviously he's putting the bulk of his money towards a much larger housing project that we're going to do our best to be involved in.
And the LGBT Center is also starting to explore some bigger picture things. So I don't know if I shared this with the rest of the staff, Carter and TL, but we're having a housing forum later this month that will be specifically looking at like LGBTQ senior housing. But we hope to have a series that like one will look at LGBTQ youth and young adult housing. One will look at like LGBTQ intergenerational housing. With the eventual goal of, you know, actually building some housing that's ours and that's affordable, you know, several years down the line. So it's still in the very like exploratory kind of gathering information phases. So nothing kind of set in stone or immediately applicable, but those are some of the conversations that we are starting to have.
Thank you both. I will add that these are conversations that are also happening at the national level, and NRCDV has been involved in exploring options for what it would look like to develop affordable housing opportunities and document some of what's happening across the nation. And so that is a resource that you all can look forward to in the future, but this is a national level conversation that is happening, and we wanted to share that. And then we have another question in the webinar chat, and it reads, can participants enter the program with children or pets? If so, how are their children and pets supported?
Yeah, we definitely have some participants that have children. The support is just the same. It's just a blanket family type support. If they need help finding daycare, we'll look into that. If they need family therapy, we can look into that sort of thing. We're trying to find housing that's going to fit their needs and the size of their family if we can. Sometimes we can't, and we just make the best that we can out of it. Help provide the same type of situations, additional food. I think Carter and I just had a half-hour conversation here today about diaper sizes. I'm like, I don't know how to buy diapers, but yeah, it works the same way. Pets can be a little difficult. It depends on the housing situation and if they're support animals. So we're still working a lot out with the pet thing.
Thank you, Teal. And so it sounds like there generally is more difficulty with supporting participants to secure housing when there are pets involved.
Definitely.
And have you been able to successfully house any participants who have pets? And are there any specific strategies that you applied to be able to execute that?
I just do my best to specifically look at landlords that will accept pets. If somebody finds something that's, the perfect area, perfect price range for them, and they have a support dog, I'm like, we'll work with them to try to get the actual paperwork to say it's a support animal, and then try and work with the landlord. It doesn't always work out. People are less willing to rent to people with pets. And then you also have to look at things like pet fees, which are outrageous at this point. It's a whole nother group of rent. So it's definitely a work in progress.
Thank you. And then we had some more questions come into the Q&A, but I will first start off by reading some of the comments that came through. So this participants or audience member says, it's also important to explain to your clients that when they aren't respectful of owner's property, that landlord and property managers may decide not to work with the program in the future, which reduces the housing options for the next person. Another attendee shared, I love the idea of incentivizing for the clients. I have been on a lot of webinars where landlord incentives are discussed. And we have another question that came through, which says, what happens if they can't pay for the apartment after 12 months on their own?
Once they're in the program, or just any participant that comes through our doors, if they need additional assistance, we will provide additional assistance and do what we can to help them get back to a place where they can continue the rent on their own. And sometimes it's just a matter of, hey, they just had a bad patch and they need a minute and that additional help. And that's what we're there for.
Right. And that assistance comes with additional case management. Like, oh, you might have thought we were out your life a little bit, but ta-da, we're back.
Thank you all for sharing that. And those were all the questions that we received. Thank you all for sending those questions. We do still have some time, so if you have any additional questions, please do not hesitate to share those. But as we move towards wrapping up our conversation today, one of the questions that I wanted to ask of our panelists today is, when we think about some of the current structures that exist today and all of the challenges that you all have encountered in supporting participants to access housing, and how these funds have been really important in helping you all do that work. What can you say about sustainability of funding beyond the grant period? What are you all exploring in your processes to keep the funding sustained? And what advice do you have for organizations to keep funding sustained?
Yeah, that's a great question, and definitely something that we're always thinking about. So for this particular program and particular funding stream, like our grant period actually ends today. So we're wrapping up this grant. The exciting thing is that we have been awarded another grant from the same funding source, the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, that is much larger and will allow us to actually purchase a building with at least 2 housing units in it. So we're really thrilled about that. And some of the lessons learned through this first implementation of the at-home program sort of informed how we approach this second grant application. We've seen amazing successes and have been really thrilled with the implementation of this 12-month tiered rental assistance program. We've also learned that some participants need even more intensive case management than what we've been able to provide, which is more than most other agencies provide. And so we decided to kind of pivot for this next iteration of the program to more concentrated support for fewer participants. So being able to house 2 participants at least, in their own units in this new building that will be ours, and then be able to really focus on them providing intensive case management over the course of a year. So they wouldn't have to worry about like rent during that year. It would be really focused on, helping them address mental health issues or physical health issues, some substance misuse issues, getting and maintaining stable employment, pursuing educational goals. So really honing in on some of our folks who have higher needs and being able to provide that stable housing without the pressure of having to pay even a portion of the rent, and focusing on helping them to achieve some of their goals in these other areas so that by the end of that year of transitional housing, then they would be set up for success to move into their own apartment. So it's a different model. So it's transitional housing versus rapid rehousing, but it's something that we're excited to try. And the fact that, we'll have our own brick and mortar housing. It'll be small, but it'll be ours, is a really big step. So that's kind of what is coming up next for us with this program. And we have other funding streams that support housing work in other ways that will continue, which is exciting. So I think for other agencies, finding that mix of funding streams that work for you all, and figuring out what models work for you and the folks that you're serving, and finding the funding streams that will support those over the long term is key.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Amanda, and congratulations to you and the center for securing this grant funding. And we look forward to all that you all are going to do with it. And we should definitely do another webinar to talk about learnings from that transitional housing program. But we had one question that came in from Brian, and considering our time today, I believe that is the last question that we will take. And it says, has there been enough data collected to show HUD My apologies. The question reads, has there been enough data collected to show HUD that an RFP should be put out to look for agencies to apply for funding?
So we don't get any HUD funding, so I'm not sure of the details of how that works. But we do collect data for this program, demographics, housing and income for when someone is coming into the program, family size. We track the services that are provided to them, and then we look at, what are their outcomes at the end of the program and after the program. Certainly we're happy to share that if that's helpful to anyone. I certainly hope that federal funding agencies are looking for more and innovative ways to support community organizations doing housing work.
Thank you all so much. Many thanks to the audience for all the questions that you sent in, and special thanks to our panelists for going over those questions and providing very comprehensive responses. As we move to close out our conversation today, just want to open it back up to you panelists to see if there are any concluding thoughts that you would like to share.
I'd just like to say, it's not easy, the housing work that we do, but it's gratifying and it's important. So you might get discouraged sometimes, but just take a breath and come back at it.
I don't have anything else to add. I just wanted to say thanks for having us and best of luck to everyone watching.
Yeah, I'm grateful for this opportunity as well, and excited to hopefully see and learn more about other housing work that's happening across the country.
Thank you all so much. And once again, many thanks to all of the members of our audience for engaging with this webinar, for being here today, and for sharing very insightful questions as well as comments. For those who also shared resources in the chat, we do greatly appreciate your participation today. Again, thank you to the members of our panel. We are excited to see the work and continue to be in collaboration and community with the LGBT Center of Central PA. And finally, to all of our interpreters, as well as NRCDV staff members who have been supporting everything from the administration and logistics to our technical support. We greatly appreciate all your support for this conversation today. And we will move to wrap up. Thank you all so much. Please visit the safehousingpartnerships.org website for resources on more information on supporting survivors as it relates to addressing homelessness and housing instability issues. Thank you very much, and everyone have a wonderful rest of your day.